spoken this at length on the 18th of April in relation to this. This whole section is in the bill at our insistence, and it was amendments that I and Deputy Troy put forward that were passed, which do actually take away the noise insulation scheme away from DAA, take away the voluntary purchase scheme away from DAA and give it to the competent authority. That's what it actually does. That's factual. There isn't a contradiction there. It actually happens, and it's in the bill, and for the first time that is significant. And it is significant now that it won't be the Airport Authority who are the ones who are making the offers, and the offers up to now for most of the houses, particularly on the west side of the airport in the St Margaret's area, Old Clochran as well, have been wholly inadequate. And I've said that time and time again, wholly inadequate. And the provisions of that scheme and the valuations within that scheme have been inadequate. This is a way of moving it forward. I think people should be honest and recognise that, and not state what isn't the fact. The fact of the matter is now, for the first time, a competent authority, not Dublin Airport Authority, will be the ones who will decide on the terms, the scope and the scale of what is the voluntary purchase scheme at the moment, which is an insufficient scheme. That is a fact. It's indisputable, and it was in the bill at the amendments that we put forward at committee stage, which others didn't support at the time. So that is important, and it's in. Secondly, in relation to noise contours and in relation to the noise insulation scheme, again, and I worked extensively with officials within the department on this to ensure that the noise insulation scheme again would be taken away from the Dublin Airport Authority for charges of conflict of interest and others, which I agree with. If you're going to expand the noise insulation scheme and you're the Airport Authority, it's going to cost you more money. That's why I wanted it to be with the competent authority and would deal with contours, not contour. That was another change that we made here to make sure it was dealt with the new runway, the new flight paths, both in and out, and that there would be an independent arbiter of who is in that scheme and who is not. And that, again, is indisputable. So there's no point at this late stage trying to muddy the waters and say that that in some way, shape or form this is not in the... It is in the legislation now. And that is significant because it will bring fairness back into it. And it also moves the situation forward. Because if this isn't passed, we're left with the status quo. We're left with what we have, which is an insufficient insulation scheme and a wholly insufficient voluntary purchase scheme. So what we do is we just say, well, we're not going to do anything with it, and we're going to just leave it as it is. We're going to have another 4, 5, 6, 7 years of people not being able to move on with their lives, not being able to make decisions about where they live, not being able to get their homes and apartments and indeed businesses insulated. So that's the alternative. That is the alternative. And whilst everything in the bill, of course, is not perfect. There's been major improvements, and particularly in this area in Section 20. What it does not do, this legislation, and I want to correct a charge that has just been made as well by Deputy Daly, is it doesn't set aside any of the restrictions that are there at the moment at all. It does not do that. So to tell people that is wholly and utterly incorrect and irresponsible. I am completely and utterly opposed to unrestricted night flights, as most people are, as indeed my party is too. And that's a decision that the competent authority will make and could very much end up with An Bord Pleanála. An Bord Pleanála is mentioned within this bill, again at our insistence. And it could very well end up there, but that would be for an application made by the Airport Authority that would have to be adjudicated upon by the competent authority. So it does not set the restrictions aside should the second runway open, because right now, at the moment, as we know, there aren't any restrictions. There are no restrictions under the existing runway in law. When the new runway opens, those Bord Pleanála restrictions will take place. Should DAA wish to take that, they take it to the competent authority. That will be decided, and anyone then can appeal that further, whether they objected at the first stage. Again, at our insistence on that. So there have been significant changes made to this scheme. The bill does not set aside those restrictions, nor should it ever do so. I understand the points that Deputy Ryan was trying to make by way of his amendment to this amendment. I think that was something in the first stage that we actually had to tidy up the initial amendment that we made, that it didn't have an unintended consequence of dealing with anywhere across the country that may be impacted by flight paths. We want it in the adjacent communities, both to the east and to the west, and indeed north and south of the runways when applicable, so that we weren't actually expanding the scheme to other parts of the country. So bypassing this amendment, I think it's a significant change within this bill, one that we fought for and I've circulated the official note, which I read into the record as well on the 18th of April, the official note from the Department dated the 11th of April, which states exactly what this change will mean. Independent oversight and application of a revised and hopefully greatly improved voluntary purchase scheme, and independent regulation and oversight and application of a revised and expanded noise insulation scheme that's needed anyway right now. It's needed anyway. And if we don't do this, well then that scheme will not be expanded because it remains in the gift of the Dublin Airport Authority, and I don't want that to happen.